Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope everyone is well. In this video, I want to look at some important rules and ethics to do with debating and engaging with people, especially in our day and age where we have to do dialogue, especially as Muslims living in the West and living in minority context, and we have to talk to people and debate and have dialogue with people who may not necessarily hold the same views as me and you. And looking at it the other way, they may find that our views are something that they cannot agree with as well. So how do we engage with them? How do we have a dialogue with them in a way that's meaningful and allows them to learn more about us, but also allows us to learn more about them? So I'm taking this from an important book on moral philosophy by someone called Christian Erk. It's an important book. It looks at fundamental concepts when you're engaging in philosophy, but also when you're engaging with the other, when people have different views to you as well. So there's some basic rules which I just want to touch upon in this video. But before I do that, it's worth reminding ourselves that there is a certain element of competence that's required. And so whenever you're engaging in a form of dialogue, you're not just doing it so that someone can understand your argument, but also to explain to them your premises. On what basis do you hold those views? On what basis do you have that worldview or that belief as well? And so it's a conversation as well as premises. So when we have conversations with people, especially when we're trying to find out truth or trying to come to some sort of understanding of one another, we should come to a place where we start with our premises. On what basis do you hold these beliefs as well? And this is something that Socrates talks about in terms of having what's called active listening, right? We listen to people with the aim of understanding them. A lot of times people are not quite listening to what is being said. So the first thing is that when we talk to someone or we have a conversation with someone and when they're speaking, our aim is to try and understand what they're saying. We don't necessarily have to agree with what they're saying, but we must understand exactly what they are saying. Otherwise, we will miss the point as well. But it also allows us to dig deeper into our own arguments and the arguments that are presented to us. If we're listening very, very carefully, we can find ways where we can dig deeper and uncover some of the arguments that might be presented to us as well. But it's also important to bear in mind that when we're having dialogue, we're having a dialogue with a person, a human being. And so we must also maintain the highest levels of respect and dignity when we're having these dialogues. So let me talk about the first few rules, if you like, of having a dialogue with somebody. First and foremost, number one is comprehensibility. What does that mean? All speakers should at least try to express themselves in such a manner that they are really understood by their dialogue partners. In other words, tabligh, making sure that the person that you're speaking to understands exactly what you're saying. Of course, this means that you speak loudly, you speak clearly, and you don't use unnecessary jargon, or you don't use harsh or coarse words as well. In other words, using inciting language or polemics, right? Saying things that aren't really professional or unnecessary. That's number one. The second thing is what's called having a polite demeanor. In other words, our dialogue should be one that's civil. It should be done in an atmosphere where we are respecting one another. And this is the idea of philosophy, which is that we are in search of truth, the loving search for truth, hikmah, wisdom. So that's number two. Number three is that one should be impartial and one should be able to fairly examine all the positions that are held as well. Okay, so there should be a willingness to critically question the positions of all dialogue partners, including your own. So one should be able to interrogate, one should be able to criticize and critique positions held by people, but at the same time, one should be allowed to respectfully critique your own positions as well. And it should always be done with a sense of respect as well of all positions. We should be open to the idea that we might have got it wrong and other people might have the truth. This is something that's part of our Islamic tradition as well. The next thing, I guess number 4, is that there should be an orientation by the results of serious dialogical scrutiny. What does that mean? So the partners in a dialogue should allow themselves to be convinced by the best argument. Who can bring out the strongest argument? And this might mean that we abandon something that we hold very dear to us, an argument that's cherished and held very, very dear to us as well. Because one should have a intention or goodwill that I'm here to learn and to arrive as close as possible as I can to the truth. The next one is very, very important as for Muslims, because we are known and we should be known for people of truthfulness and consistency. So one should speak the truth even when you're presenting your arguments, or the arguments that of the person that you disagree with. They should be presented with truthfulness, even if you disagree with them. And when you present your argument, you should not contradict yourself. You should not go against something that you held or you've said previously as well. The next one is that one should have openness and freedom. Especially this is in our culture where we live in a cancel culture. If people don't disagree with you or people don't like what you say, they usually cancel you. So in a dialogue, everyone should first be allowed to freely express everything that they think is right. In our culture, that's not happening anymore. People aren't able to express their views, or certain views are given more precedent over others as well. And the final one in here, which is really part of the Islamic tradition, is that one should not be forced to take a position. There should be a lack of compulsion. We have this idea in the Quran, La ikraha fid din. There's no compulsion in our religion. So no speaker in a dialogue must be prevented from stating and arguing for his position, but also from problematizing and critically scrutinizing other position arguments. And people should not be forced to take a position. This is the adab. This is the decorum of how we should engage in dialogue. We can find this in books written by our own scholars, but I wanted to show you that this is part of the Western tradition as well. And many Muslims would, when they read this, would of course agree with this. And I'm sharing this because we live in an age where there's a lack of respect, tolerance showed towards other people. And what is tolerance? One must ask. Now, tolerance should not be mixed up with what's called indifferentialism. In other words, tolerance doesn't mean that you can't criticize someone or someone's actions or someone's beliefs, right? That's not what tolerance is. Because when you have a firm position in something, and you're convinced of your position, then you can practice tolerance towards others. And the word tolerance itself stems from the Latin verb tolerare, which means to endure, bear, or suffer. So somebody might have a position which you don't agree with, which you don't like, but you have to bear it as well. So a tolerant person is a person who is enduring the existence of positions different from their own. But in order to be able to do so, he must first have a position of their own. So to be tolerant basically presupposes that you hold your own position, you have your own beliefs and your own convictions as well. And you should be convinced of the truth of your position, whether other people have different views on something as well. Now there's one more important point that I want to add here as well, that we need to distinguish between the person and the thing. So even though we might disagree with a argument or a view or a belief, we must never make it personal. We must never make it such that we attack the person themselves. We can go for the argument, we can debate the argument or that view being held, but one must always show respect for the person. And we have this saying, of course, it's not what you say but how you say it. So one should always avoid personal attacks, ad hominem attacks as well. And it's also important that even if we disagree with someone, we should use it as an opportunity when we're having a dialogue with them or being tolerant, that we're open to learning from them. So we might as Muslims disagree with Christians, we might as Muslims disagree with people of different faiths or not, or people who subscribe to different philosophies, but we should be open to learn from them. Doesn't mean that we accept their beliefs. If I'm having a dialogue with someone who shares a different belief to me, it doesn't mean that I accept what they're saying. What I'm actually doing is learning from them. This is what Muslims have always done as well. And one should always remember that your insights, your beliefs can never be imposed. You can't force your views on other people. You have to dialogue and have a conversation in such a way that they voluntarily, they willingly accept your message. And this is the beauty of Islam, that Islam spread, and Islam as a religion of truth that believes that there are things that are objectively true, spread because it used ways of argumentation, ways of disputation, which were lovingly done in a way which were in a pursuit of truth and love for fellow human beings. So I hope that's been useful. Inshallah, I look forward to speaking with you again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.